Myst, the Book of Donnie, continues with Video 6 as read by the bathroom reader. I am covering for the Plurality Report, who is wondering if he is the only one who thinks that Liam Neeson has absolutely zero comedic timing. After a long day's work, the huge cutting frame was maneuvered into position before the doorway, 4 massive bolts securing it to the walls on either side. Then, taking the utmost care, the seal was breached. 6 of the Donnie, using handheld cutters, the ancient door prized from the stone in which it had been set. Then, and only then, was it removed, the stone sighing as it gave, a huge gust of stale air wafting out into that space beneath the rock. The massive slab of stone was lifted on 4 huge pulleys and lowered, the thick hawsers straining at the weight, onto the floor of the hall. Then, and only then, when it was safely down, did Atris turn and contemplate the inner chamber. The fire marble they had fired into the chamber still glowed, but shadows gathered at the edges of vision. The far end of the chamber was dark. The doorway, if door it was hidden from view. A dozen or more pillars ranged along each side of that narrow chamber, set back into the walls, their marbled surfaces covered with strange markings. Stepping out between them, Atris raised the lamp, then walked over to one of the pillars. He stood there a moment, staring up at it, then turned. "Oma, come here." Oma hastened across. "What do you make of these?" Oma stood there a while, studying the carvings. They looked like the signs and symbols of some ancient language. "I don't know." "Esel?" Esel shook his head. "I've never seen their like." "No," Catherine agreed, "and yet they look familiar." "Familiar?" Atris turned to her. "You think you've seen these somewhere before?" "Yes, but I can't think where." Atris turned back, then, stopping across, reached up and put his fingers into the groove of one of the more complex characters. The cuts were deep and smooth, each edge and surface finely polished. As for the symbol itself, it had a definite finished shape of a letter in an alphabet, yet at the same time it also suggested a picture. Atris stepped back, lifting the lantern, trying to see if there were any other markings farther up the pillar, but what the lamp revealed was not more markings, but books, thousands upon thousands of books, on shelves, recessed into the walls, high up and back from the pillars. No wonder they hadn't seen them at first. Oma gave a cry of pure delight, while Esel turned, looking to Karad, his long, furrowing face filled with a sudden urgency. "Karad, Eras, bring Gladys, quickly now." They were back within a minute, Eras scrambling up onto the ledge, then hurrying down, one of the ancient leather-bound books clutched to his chest. As Oma carefully opened the page, they gathered round. "Look," Esel said, "it's the same script as on the pillars." "It looks very much like it," Oma agreed. "And the panel." "Don't touch it," Atris said quietly. "There is no Guild of Maintainers seal, and who knows how old these ages are, or if they are stable or otherwise." Atris stared at the page, unable to decipher that ancient script, yet there was something about it that was familiar. Looking up, he raised his lantern once again, astonished by the sight. If they were all like this. He walked on. Slowly, the lamp held up before him, the darkness receding before him. Wall after wall of books met his gaze until he felt quite overwhelmed by it all. Then, lowering his eyes, he turned away and stopped dead. Just ahead of him, through a low arch flanked by pillars, was an anteroom. He stepped through into a small chamber with 4 tiny alcoves leading off. The floor was marble, the low ceiling a concave circle of mosaic. His lamp blazed in that tiny space, and as he looked about him, Atris realized that in each alcove the character that had appeared on the very first pillar was repeated. And at the very center of the door, the character that had appeared on the very first pillar was repeated. Atris stared at a moment, then turned, looking back toward where the others were still huddled around the ancient book. Eros, bring Master Targon, now. Tell him we have need of his services once more. Atris took his eye from the lens of the scope, then straightened up. He nodded to himself, as if some guess of his had been confirmed, then turned and gestured for Catherine to take the sample capsule from the shaft. While Catherine tested the air sample of the second chamber, Miriam studied the surface of the nearest pillar. Like all of the others, its surface was completely covered in the strange ancient markings. Isel and Oma had already begun the task of copying down the symbols, and though they had progressed little beyond the first two pillars, that had not stopped them from speculating upon their possible meaning. Oma was of the opinion that this was an early form of Dani, if only because of its age and location, but Isel was not so sure. Miriam, looking at them once more, was struck by how beautiful the markings were. Catherine came across, showing Atris the sample. It's safe. Good. Atris turned and looked across the room. Eros, bring me a cutter. The book was huge, much bigger than a normal Dani book, the leather of its cover as thick and hard as slate, but strangest of all was the writing, for like the carvings on the pillars, it was in a language none there recognized, though aspects of it were familiar. For thousands of years the book had lain there, sealed into the alcove at the far end of that ancient hidden hall. Now, seeing it there, the descriptive panel on the right-hand page, glowing softly in the half-light, Miriam felt something between awe and sheer superstitious fear of it. Atris, careful as ever, forbade any of them to touch it. He was determined to find out all he could before they used it. That was, if they used it at all. Burn it, old Targon said, on looking at that strange alien script. That's what I say. If our forefathers thought to bury these chambers and seal the doorways up, then no good can come of it. Burn it, Atris. Burn it, then seal these chambers up once more. I agree, Atris said. The book is far too dangerous. But Isel and Oma argued otherwise. We should copy it, Oma said. See what sense we can make of it. In all likelihood, it's related to the markings on the pillars. If we can find a clue to reading it... Atris hesitated. All right, he said after a moment. But you will take the utmost care in copying it. I still say burn it, Master Targon said, shaking his head, a sour look on his heavily lined face. It may well come to that, Atris said, glancing at the old man, but it won't harm to take a look. That is, if Oma and Isel can unlock the meaning of that script. Burn it, Targon said, more determined than ever. Burn it now before any harm is done. But Miriam, watching Atris's face, saw that Atris was not about to bow to the old man's superstitious fear of the book. I hear you, Master Targon, and I note what you say, but I shall burn no book without good cause. Then you're a fool, young Atris, Targon said, and without another word he stalked away, the sound of his footsteps fading as he vanished into the darkness at the far end of the chamber. Atris stared a while, then turned, looking to Oma and Isel once more. Begin at once, he said. The sooner we know what this means, the more comfortable I'll feel. Oma sat at his makeshift desk inside the inner cell, dressed in one of the dark green decontamination suits, complete with gloves and visor. The ancient book lay to his left, open, the top 2 pages protected by a thin transparent sheet. From his position on the other side of the bars, Isel looked on. He too wore protective garb. Well, is it the same? He asked, waiting for Oma to check back in his notes. Oma ruffled through the pages, then stopped, having clearly found what he was looking for, and read through the earlier passage. Half turning, he shrugged. I don't know. It's almost the same. Almost? Isel's heavy eyebrows went up. For the last hour or so, the two brothers had been debating a passage part way through the text that seemed to have no correlation with the normal, expected structure of such descriptive books. In it, many of the earlier passages they had already translated seemed to be repeated, yet with minor changes of phrasing and emphasis. The changes are so minor, it's almost as if the writer is trying to reinforce the earlier phrases. Aesel frowned deeply. Reinforcement, yes, but to what purpose? To make it more stable, perhaps? Atris said, coming across where he had been checking one of the big EV suits. Then why not a direct repetition? Because that would be redundant. By making such subtle changes in the repeated phrases, the writer may have been attempting to make the age he was writing more specific. Oma had turned to face Atris. But why not simply put in those subtleties first time round? As I said, to make it all the more stable. I know from experience that the more subtle you try to be, the more specific, the more unstable your ages are likely to be. It was the one great flaw with the worlds my father wrote. Then why did the practice cease? Who can say? Things change. Perhaps they felt it was redundant and let the practice lapse. Maybe, Oma said. Yet I rather like it. That is, if it is what you think it is, Master Atris. And I, Atris said, smiling, then changing the subject. Are you still having problems with the phraseology? Oma grinned and looked at his brother. We were, but we think we've mastered that now. Most of the oddities are simple structural inversions in the individual sentences. They probably accord with standard speech patterns of the time. Atris nodded. They knew now for certain that the underlying basis of the ancient script was Dani, for the primitive forms matched the modern ones virtually one-to-one. So how long do you think it will take you to complete the work? Oma looked to his brother. 2 days, 3 at most. Then keep to it. And Oma? Yes, Master Atris? You might ask Merim and Iras to look at the characters you have not yet managed to translate. They have a fresh eye to the language, and who knows if they might not see what more familiar eyes would overlook. I shall prepare a page for them. Good. Then I shall leave you to it. It was time, Atris decided, to make a decision. For the best part of a day, he had sat alone at his desk, reading through the translated copy of the book. Well, Catherine asked finally, taking a seat across from him. Atris considered a moment, then answered her. It is phrased so strangely, unlike the Dani books that we are used to. There is a certain ambiguity to it, and yet on the surface it seems a safe and stable world. Those reinforcing phrases would seem to make it so. Yet, what if there's something we've overlooked? Some small yet crucial detail. He shook his head. I can't risk one of our people being trapped there. Then do as Master Turgon said. Burn the book. At least that way you'll remove the temptation. You think it is a temptation, then? Of course it is. The young people think of nothing else, talk of nothing else. Why they are so curious about what lies on the other side of that page that they would link at once if you gave permission, without a moment's thought for their safety. Atris stared at her. I didn't realize. On the other hand, what? Catherine looked down, a strange smile on her lips. You or I could go, and take the risk, or destroy the book. They stared at each other a moment longer. Then, with a tiny shrug, Atris reached across and took one of the last of their small store of blank linking books from the side. Okay, he said, glancing up at her. I'll write a linking book, but I go, understand? No one else. Yes, my love, she answered, watching him open the slender book, then reach across for the pen. You alone. When it was done, Atris gathered together the small team who had been working on the project and told them the news. There were grins and cheers, and then, strangely, silence, as the full implication of what Atris had said sank in. "But you can't," Iras said. "The risk is far too great." "No greater than for any of you," Atris answered, determined not to be swayed by any argument of theirs. "I've made up my mind, and I won't have it changed. I link through tomorrow morning, once everything's in place. Karad, Iras, you'll be responsible for the suit, all right? Catherine will run the laboratory. Merim, you'll assist her. Master Tamon." "Atris, Iras is right. You cannot go. You're far too important. If anything went wrong..." "Precisely. If anything went wrong, it would be on my conscience, and I cannot have that." Tamon shrugged, then bowed his head. "Good," Atris said. "Then you, Master Tamon, have a special task. If there are complications, you will take the book and burn it. Understand me?" "Atris." "No arguments," Atris said, with a finality that silenced the old master. But looking around the circle of friends, it was clear to him that none of them were happy with the arrangements. "Until the morning, then." It was long after midnight when they returned. Iras led the way, a veiled lamp held up before him as they made their way along the corridor that led to the guild cell. Just behind Iras came Merim and Karad. "I really don't like this," Merim whispered for what must have been the dozenth time. "You want Atris to risk himself?" Iras hissed back at her, attempting to be angry and quiet at the same time. "If there's no other way, and you know it, we must test the age before Atris links through." "But Iras..." "Iras is right," Karad hissed, turning to look back at her. "We owe Atris everything. If we were to lose him, then we ourselves would be lost." Merim looked down, chastised, but she wasn't finished yet. "It isn't right, going behind his back like this." "Maybe not," Iras conceded, "but he would never allow us otherwise. You heard him earlier. He was adamant." Merim sighed. "Okay, then I will go." "You can't," Karad and Iras said as one. "Why not? I'd be missed less than you two." "Nonsense," Iras said. "I'd miss you dreadfully." "And I," Karad said. "But that's beside the point. Iras is going." Iras turned, wide-eyed to face him. "What?" "You heard," Karad said. "Or have you learned how to operate the suit since we last used it?" "No, Then it is decided, unless you don't want to go." "I'm not afraid, if that's what you mean." "Then it's decided," Karad said, and, turning back, headed swiftly along the corridor, leaving the other two to catch up as best they could. "Are all the sampling capsules fitted, Catherine?" "They're all in place, and there's extra oxygen in the cylinder on your back, just in case." Atris's eyes followed Catherine as she busied herself at the laboratory bench. Sensing he was watching her, she looked up. "What is it?" "Nothing," he answered. "Are you ready?" She nodded, her face showing no emotion, as if this were a purely routine matter. Karad looked at Catherine as if about to say something, but Iras frowned at him. "Come on, Karad. Help me with the helmet now." And then all was ready. Slowly, like some great mechanical thing, Atris stepped into the cage, his back to the inner cell. The door clunked shut behind him. The seals came down. Slowly, the cage revolved. "Good luck," Catherine called. With a clunk, the bolts slid back again, and Atris stepped out into the inner cell. Slowly he turned until he faced them again. Then, raising his right glove, he brought it down on the back of his left. The suit shimmered, then vanished. Merim looked across at Catherine, sensing the tension in her, the momentary fear in her eyes, and looked down. 2 seconds later, the suit was back. At once they were swarming about it, reaching through the bars to pluck the sampling capsules from their niches, even as the decontamination unit lowered itself over the suit, spraying Atris with a fine mist of chemicals. "Well?" Master Tamon asked. "What did you say?" Atris laughed. "Ha ha ha! Rock! I was surrounded by rock." Merim, looking to Eras, gave the faintest smile. "Rock?" Master Tamon queried, surprised to find Atris so excited about mere rock. "Yes, and there's another doorway," Atris went on excitedly. "Like this one, but it too is sealed. And there's a book, almost identical to the one we found, in the same ancient script." "A book?" Master Tamon looked about him, seeing the sudden excitement in every eye. "Yes," Atris said, "and if my guess is right, it links back here. But come, let's get on with it. Eras, set the timer for 5 minutes. I want a much better look this time." There was barely room in the alcove to turn, let alone set up the portable drilling machinery, but somehow it was done. Eras, his movements clumsy in the suit, made the first test bore, alone in that distant age, sensors on the special suit ready to activate his return should there be any sudden change in atmospheric pressure or temperature. Slowly the drill ate through the rock, then suddenly it was through, the bit meeting no further resistance. Eras drew back, then sealing the hole, he activated the sampler. As the tiny glass bubble moved back through the center of the drilling shaft, he felt the urge to take the scope, which was in the room with him, and peer through into the space beyond. But he had his orders. They would test the sample first, then and only then would they take a look. Slotting the sample capsule into the clip on his breast pocket, Eras pressed one hand against the stud in the palm of the other and linked back. At once, Catherine stepped up and, unclipping the capsule, turned and took it back down the steps to her workbench. Eras looked about him. For once, no one spoke. This was the worst of it, having to wait about in the suit while the tests were made. It was not that it was uncomfortable. At most, there was the feeling of cushioned constraint. But at such times Eras found himself questioning Atris's little-by-little approach and wishing he'd take a risk now and then. Atris came across now and smiled at him. "Did the drill bit penetrate very far, Eras?" "A hand's breadth," he answered. "Good." Atris turned, looking down toward where Catherine was busy at the centrifuge. "Well, we'll know very soon now." "Atris?" "Yes?" "Have you thought any more about why it might have been sealed?" Atris hesitated, then shook his head. "And Master Turgon's view?" All were listening now. Last night Master Turgon had reiterated his opinion that they should leave well be, that they should burn the linking book and reseal the chambers. Atris shrugged. "I only wish we knew more about the great king. I have a vague recollection that my grandmother, Anna, once mentioned something about it, but what it was, I can't recall." For a moment he stared away into the shadows at the far end of the chamber, as if lost in thought. Then he returned and, smiling, went down the steps again to stand beside Catherine at the workbench. "Well?" he asked. She glanced up at him, then continued with her work. "I'll need to do more tests." "Stale air?" "Quite the contrary," she answered. "If my results are right, the air in there is fresh, and there are living organisms in it too. Pollen as well." "Pollen?" Catherine nodded. "Yes. Now let me get on with things, Atris. As soon as I know something more." "You'll let me know. But there's definitely air. Fresh air." "Yes," she said. "Now leave me to get on." Atris turned, then hastened up the stairs, gesturing to Eras as he went. "Okay, let's get you back inside. Let's see what's behind that wall." It took them days to cut a big enough hole in the wall, the task made more difficult by the fact they could not use the portable power tools within the alcove, and that the two men standing side by side had little room to maneuver. They had spent the best part of an hour laboring beneath the light of a single lamp, careful not to nudge each other as, using hammer and chisel, they chipped out the channels in the rock. But now the job was done. 3 metal hooks had been screwed into the partially cut section of the wall, and a link of chain threaded through them. Eros now held the end of that chain, the powerful hydraulics of the special gloves he was wearing maintaining a tight grip as Atris swung the great hammer. The section of wall gave with a great crunch, the weight of the stone making it slew to one side, but the chain restrained it, keeping it from falling. "Are you all right?" Atris asked. "I'm fine," Eros said, straining to keep the thing from sliding away from him. "Good, then lower it slowly. I'll shine the lamp through." Atris reached up and unclipped the lamp, then poked it through the gap. There was an eerie silence. The only sound was that of their own breathing. That and the grating of the stone, the click, click, click of the chain links against the edge of the wall as Eros lowered the section to the ground. "Good," Atris said, as the huge piece of rock came to rest against the floor. "I'll step through and secure it." Personally, Eros would just have kicked the thing in, but Atris was keen to do as little damage as he could. "We are explorers," he'd said, "not vandals." Even so, he heard Atris's gasp, sensed as much as saw him turn, and raised the lamp high. "Atris?" The lamp swung back. In its sudden brightness, he could see a huge chamber, not unlike the chamber back in Donny, with row after row of broad stone shelves climbing the walls above the pillars. Another library, only all of these shelves were empty. Eros stepped out into the chamber and stood beside Atris, taking in the sight. Somehow, those empty shelves made it seem even more desolate than it otherwise might have been, and there was dust everywhere. Huge drifts of dust, like sand, covering the marbled floor in all but 1 or 2 places. There was a sense of great age, of long centuries of neglect. Atris gestured toward the far end of the chamber. "Let's see what's down there." They walked across, their footsteps muffled, small clouds of dust lifting, then floating like smoke upon the air. Atris stopped. There was a huge doorway before them. Like those in Donny, it had a massive circle of stone surrounding it, its pale surface decorated with a ring of stars, but unlike those in Donny, this one seemed to be ajar. Atris walked toward it, then mounted the steps. It was ajar. He set down the lamp, then stepped closer, peering through the crack, unwilling to shine a light through that narrow space until he knew what was on the other side. It was dark, yet not as dark as the chamber in which he stood, and after a moment his eyes grew accustomed to the half-light within. Another chamber, larger, grander than the library, but in ruin, a number of its mighty pillars fallen, its great arched ceiling cracked in places, revealing a cloud-strewn night of brilliant stars. And now Eros came and stood beside him, squinting into the darkness. "Ruins," he said quietly, unable to keep the disappointment from his voice, but Atris made no comment, only, "Come, let's fetch the others. It's time we explored this age." Part 4. Torn pages curl and brown. The flames fly up. In the flickering light, a cry. Who will lift the fallen stones? Who will link the broken chain? From the Korok Gemma, verses 11,383 to 86. Atris turned to look as, one by one, his party linked through into the alcove, then stepped out into the chamber. They had brought with them lamps and provisions, and as Oma, the last of them, stepped through, that ancient place seemed ablaze with the brilliant light of the fire marbles. Concerned that they might reveal themselves to hostile eyes, Atris had them extinguish all but one of the lamps. Then, and only then, did he lead them across to the door at the far end of the chamber. Through the door was open a crack, though the door was open a crack, long eons of dereliction had wedged it in place, such that even with four of them heaving against its carved stone face, they could not budge it the smallest fraction. Eventually it was Merim who, squeezing through the gap, set about clearing some of the debris from behind it. That done, they tried again, and this time managed to move it back an inch or two, allowing the rest to squeeze through. That second chamber, which Atris had named the Temple, was a forlorn sight. It was not long now until the dawn, and in that last hour of the night it seemed impossible that they would find anything that might justify the time they had spent investigating this mystery. This was a dead world, or a world so long abandoned as made little difference. Merim, standing in the center of that ruined chamber, turned full circle, taking in the desolation, then looked up through one of the great cracks in the fallen ceiling at the pre-dawn sky. It felt to her as if some ancient tragedy had befallen this place, some tale so old that even the Dani, that most ancient of races, had no record of it. She turned back, looking to Atris, who stood in the midst of the others, talking quietly, then spoke. "Atris, what happened here?" It was not that she expected him to answer, it was just that the question haunted her. Why was there no record of this place, and why had the books been sealed off all these thousands of years? "I don't know," Atris answered, coming across. "Perhaps we'll learn." He turned slightly, addressing them all once more. "We'll split into groups and explore the site. 1 hour, and if anyone finds anything, return here at once." They all knew what to do. They had done this now so many times it was second nature to them. Even so, it felt different this time, and as they stepped out through the great archway at the far end of the temple, there were exclamations of surprise. The temple sat at the center of a host of other buildings, on a huge plinth of stone above the rest, while about the edges of that ancient town a great wood grew, the massive trees looming over that scene of ruin. Not a building stood undamaged. In the growing light of dawn they could see that long centuries had passed since anyone had ventured here. Weeds grew thickly over the fallen stone. It was as if the tragedy had befallen Dani had also visited this place. Here, too, a great civilization had once flourished, only to crumble into dust. "Well," Atris said, when no one had moved for several minutes, "shall we see what there is to see?" "Master Atris," Merim said breathlessly, "we found something." Atris turned to her. "What is it, Merim?" She grinned. "You must see this." At the outskirts of the ruined town there was a way that wound between the massive trees, following the course of an ancient stone drainage pipe that, over the long years, had been exposed to the air and now thrust up from the earth, like the rounded back of a huge snake. They walked atop that ancient way until they came to a massive slab of ochre rock that climbed the air in front of them. "Here?" Atris queried, for there seemed no way forward, but Merim went on, climbing the rock like a mountain goat, seeming to find handholds where there appeared to be none. Shrugging, Atris followed, finding it much easier than he'd thought. The rock was porous and easy to grip. Even so, he felt breathless by the time he'd come to the top of it. As Catherine came near the top, he reached down and helped her up. Only then did he turn around and look. Only then did he understand just how high up they were. And even as he registered that fact, his mind seemed to flip and his mouth fell open in sheer astonishment as he took in what he was looking at. They were on the edge of a great plateau, a sheer drop of maybe half a mile directly beneath them, while below them, stretching from horizon to horizon, was the most beautiful land Atris had ever seen. a land of lush, verdant farmland, massive fields divided by meandering waterways that sparkled in the early morning sunlight. Scattered here and there amid the vast landscape were buildings, huge, beautiful buildings of gleaming white stone, each set atop a grassy mound, and each one quite unlike anything Atreus had ever seen before, with a grandeur and elegance that took the breath away. God-like they were, such that, staring at them, Atreus wondered what manner of people inhabited this land. All this Atreus took in at a glance, yet looking more distant, he caught his breath, seeing in the far distance its contours veiled in mist, another huge plateau, much larger than that on which they stood, up the soaring walls of which climbed a vast city of the same gleaming stone, the whole great edifice topped by a single massive building, with great towers and gilded domes. Even at such a distance, Atreus understood at once. Here was something far greater than Dani, a civilization so vast and ordered that it made his schemes for rebuilding that ancient home seem futile. No wonder they had let the ruins behind him lie untended. What need had they for such when they lived their daily lives amid such splendor? Looking out across that magnificent landscape, Atreus felt a longing he had never thought to feel. A longing to belong to the land he had first seen only a moment before, and, looking to Catherine, who stood beside him, he saw it in her eyes too. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Yes," he answered, taking her hand. For a time they stood there, silent, lost in a haze of astonishment. Then there was a shout from below, from the foot of the rock. "Atreus! Atreus! What's going on up there?" But Atreus had turned back, staring open-mouthed once more, his eyes filled with astonishment as they flitted from wonder to wonder in that vast and beautiful land.